By 1993, Nirvana, though still the biggest band in the world, had begun to dip. Their last album, In Utero, though debuting at #1 in the charts, had been crushed in sales by Pearl Jam's Verses. With more and more tour dates cancelled due to Kurt Cobain's health issues, and the fact that Nirvana had moved away from the polished sound of Nevermind, many of their fans had lost interest. Kurt was by now in a very fragile state, both physically and emotionally. His chronic stomach pain made eating difficult, and coupled with his heroin addiction, left him appearing pale and thin. In June, when he'd been detained after an overdose, his weight was recorded at just 110 pounds. These problems were all documented by the media, who took more of an interest in his personal life than in his music. It was in early 1993 MTV had approached Nirvana to do the show. They resisted. Kurt didn't like the idea of doing a greatest hits set. It was in October he finally agreed to do the show, but he insisted that he wouldn't perform major hits like Smells Like Teen Spirit or Lithium. The performance was scheduled for a month later, so in preparation, Kurt began incorporating acoustic sets into the remaining tour dates. He also expanded the lineup by adding guitarist Pat Smear and celloist Laurie Goldston. For the show, Kurt wanted to showcase a different side of the band and himself. He wanted to strip away the aggression that powered the live shows and replace it with an honest vulnerability. The idea of this was frightening though. Kurt was nervous about exposing Nirvana's softer side. He feared the show would flop. For the show, Kurt decided to split the setlist evenly between Nirvana originals and covers that reflected his influences and personality. At one point, he considered adding Beatles songs. He even worked on an arrangement for And I Love Her, but ultimately, the idea was dropped. Instead, he settled on a single David Bowie cover, Lead Belly classic, a track by the Vaselines, and 3 songs by the Meat Puppets. As the date drew closer, Kurt worried about the show. Chris Novoselic recalled, Kurt was really nervous. Immediately after the In Utero tour ended, the band flew to New Jersey where they began first rehearsals for Unplugged. They spent 2 days working on arrangements and finalising the set. Kurt attended the rehearsals looking deathly pale. According to the Meat Puppets, he looked like Jacob Marley's ghost from A Christmas Carol. Following that, the group flew to New York for final rehearsals. The venue, Sony Music Studios in Manhattan, was chosen. While there, Kurt went about designing the set. Straight away, he said he wanted it to look nothing like the previous Unplugged shows. Kurt requested the stage be decorated with stargazer lilies, black candles, and a chandelier. He wanted to create a haunting, somber atmosphere that would match his mood. He also didn't want anything to appear commercial. He wanted the show deeply personal and symbolic. Of course, MTV hated the set design. It would look nothing like the clean image of Unplugged. They worried the funeral look Kurt was going for would be too dark for MTV viewers. In the end, MTV relented and let Kurt have complete creative control. The next tension with MTV arose when Kurt wanted to use a Fender reverb amplifier to create the perfect atmosphere. After negotiations, an MTV producer accepted, as he felt this was a matter of Kurt's nerves getting to him, and him just wanting something familiar and therefore comforting. He stated, "It was Kurt's security blanket. He was used to hearing his guitar through his Fender." To conceal the amp on stage, a box was built to make it appear as a playback monitor. When Kurt began rehearsing The Man Who Sold the World and Come As You Are, he insisted his guitar needed more colour, so effects were added. An MTV worker quipped, instead of calling it Nirvana Unplugged, they should have called it Nirvana Toned Down. At the very last minute, the day before the show, Kurt changed his mind and decided he wasn't going to play. The MTV executives were used to Kurt being awkward though. It was, they saw, just his personality. On the day of the show, despite his threats, Kurt arrived, though he was very nervous and going through withdrawals. Kurt was there, but he looked to be in such bad shape the show still wouldn't happen. An MTV assistant recalled, "There was no joking, no fun, and no smiles coming from Kurt. Everyone was more than a little concerned about the performance." Kurt Kirkwood of the Meat Puppets was also nervous. The group hadn't run through a whole set of the Meat Puppets songs. At the same time, Kurt was now lying on a sofa complaining of how sick he felt. When he said he wanted Kentucky Fried Chicken, an MTV executive ran out to get some. When the executive arrived back with the food, she was told Kurt was throwing up. Then she was told, in no uncertain terms, she needed to go out and score him some heroin, otherwise the show would be a disaster. The problem was the MTV executive had no idea how to find the drug. She suggested Valium could help with the withdrawal, and sent out an assistant who went to a corrupt pharmacist to buy some. By the time they got the Valium back to Kurt, another person had arrived with a package for him. 10 minutes later, Kurt was fine, or at least he wasn't sick anymore, but he was still very nervous. The reality of doing a stripped-down acoustic set now filled him with dread. His biggest fear was that he'd panic and start messing up the songs. He was gripped with fear, but he headed out to do soundcheck and masked his anxiety like he always did. Friends would often recall, Kurt had a way of seeming so composed while feeling deeply anxious. In front of the mic, Kurt remained professional. Away from it, Kurt turned to the MTV executive who'd scored him Valium and said, "I'm scared. Can you make sure that all the people who love me are sitting in the front row?" As they sat doing soundcheck, Kurt suddenly halted it and called over the MTV executive again. He told her again he was scared and asked if the audience will clap even if they don't play well. She replied, "Of course they're going to clap for you." He then insisted she sit close by so he could see her at all times. To relax his nerves even more, Kurt also requested someone go and get him some fretboard lubricant. He'd never used it before, but he'd watched his Aunt Mary apply it to her acoustic guitar countless times. Afterwards, the band moved backstage where Kurt waited nervously. When the show began, he stepped out with the somber presence of an undertaker, his demeanour strikingly subdued. Dressed in an olive green cardigan, faded blue jeans, and worn Converse trainers, he barely acknowledged the audience as he took his seat. Then, in a low slurred voice, he murmured, "Hello there." He then blurted out, "Plectrum," almost like a quiet cue to himself, as if marking the first step before the set began. Kurt then spoke to the audience directly for the first time, though avoiding looking at them, stating, "Good evening, this is our first record. Most people don't own it." As Kurt began strumming About a Girl, the audience recognised the song immediately and began clapping. Kurt played the song with intense concentration, with his eyes staring down at the microphone and his jaw almost clenched. As the song ended, Kurt said thank you to the audience through gritted teeth as the room filled with applause. He then went straight into the second song of the night, Come As You Are. His posture stayed hunched, cardigan sleeves brushing the guitar, and his hair falling forward. Kurt displayed a more pain tone to his voice than the studio version. We also hear Dave Grohl adding backing vocals for the first time. Understated and soft, they complemented without overwhelming. With the song over, Kurt addressed the audience for the third time, introducing Laurie Goldston on cello, while Dave Grohl introduced Pat Smear. Kurt added, Pat was a certified honorary punk rocker, before then adding, but he liked Queen better. The next song they began, Kurt introduced stating, this song was written by the Vaselines, and saying it was a rendition of an old Christian song, but they play it the Vaselines way. For the song, Chris Novoselic switched from bass to accordion, and they performed a haunting rendition. Dave Grohl's harmony perfectly blended with Kurt's voice. By far, this was the most mournful and saddest song of the night so far. The song was one of the most unexpected choices for the set. It was a testament to Kurt playing exactly what he loved and not what was expected. For the fourth song, Kurt took the mic again and guaranteed the audience he would screw it up. It was the second cover that night, David Bowie's The Man Who Sold the World. Kurt began solo picking the open riff of the song. Straight away, it sounded nothing like the original. When he sang, it was in a fragile, melancholy tone. The audience remained, as they do for the set, unusually quiet for an Unplugged show. Bare minimal chatter. The atmosphere Kurt had created apparently was entrancing. In fact, there was so much quiet, the MTV producer recalled you could hear the chairs crack between songs. When the song ended, Kurt clarified to the audience what they just heard was a David Bowie song. After that, Kurt commented he didn't screw the song up, but here's another one he could screw up. The next song was the only song of the night Kurt would play completely solo. Before Pennyroyal Tea began, Kurt said if it sounded bad, They'd have to do it again and the audience would just have to wait. The song began with Kurt strumming mournfully before singing in a low, saddened tone. The room was silent, apart from his voice, the guitar, and the sound of his chair. It was probably the most vulnerable performance of Kurt's whole career. When the song ended, Kurt looked slightly awkward. Dave Grohl said quietly, "That sounded good." Kurt replied, "Shut up." The next song they began, Kurt announced by saying, "We're gonna do Dumb now, dummy." Kurt performed the song in a very strange way, almost like he was singing to himself rather than performing for an audience. Laurie Golston's cello also gave a different feeling to the song. The mood by this point had eased. Kurt didn't seem as nervous. Before they begin the next song, Polly, Kurt explains to the audience he didn't want to play Dumb and Polly back to back because they're basically the same song. Kurt hunches over during the performance, singing in an almost monotone. There wasn't much range in this one. Kurt didn't push himself and gave an understated performance. Because of this, the song came across more menacing than the studio version. Next, another surprise choice from Nirvana's catalogue, Kurt went into On a Plane. An upbeat track, for this performance it was more subdued and introspective, especially the Somewhere I've Heard This Before mid-late. Kurt sang in a gentle tone with a slight howl on his high notes. His rasping on the chorus used perfectly. The mood was slightly lifted before coming right back down with the next song. From On a Plane, Kurt goes straight into Something in the Way without any introduction. For the song, he picked the strings instead of a dull strum as in the studio version. Kurt seemed fragile in this song as his voice wobbled. He refused to push his voice too high for the chorus and kept the tone low. When the song ended, Kurt made a joke telling an MTV assistant, "I already have 3 cups of tea already, but thank you." The audience didn't laugh and Kurt looked slightly awkward. At this point in the night, 2 of the Meat Puppets joined the group on stage. Kurt then waited as backstage one of their acoustic guitars was being tuned. After sitting a while, Kurt gets impatient and snaps, "What are they tuning, a harp?" Then they go into the first Meat Puppets song, Plateau. Kurt sings in a low rasp that almost cuts off when he hits the low notes. The song has an almost campfire feel about it. It feels like Kurt has barely rehearsed it and is still finding his footing as he goes along. As the song ends and the audience applaud, Kurt begins clapping too. Before starting the next song, Oh Me, Kurt casually tells one of the Meat Puppets to push his hair into his eyes and then introduces the track. The song felt as if it had been written for him. Its tone and lyrics perfectly suited his mood. He sang it with a quiet intensity, making it deeply personal. Before the final Meat Puppet song, Kurt tells the audience all of these songs were off the band's second album. Like a Fire begins with a wail, Kurt stretching his vocals out. Through the song, there's a lag on Kurt's timing. It only serves to bring a more haunting tone to the composition. At one point, Kurt nearly comes into the wrong verse before stopping himself. When the song ends, the 2 Meat Puppet brothers walk from the stage before shouting, "Fucking Nirvana!" Kurt turns back to the audience and says, "That was the Meat Puppets." Following their exit, the band regroup and Kurt asks the audience if there are any requests. A barrage of songs are shouted, with In Bloom mentioned. When Kurt hears it, he's bemused and says, "How are we supposed to play In Bloom acoustically?" They settle on the final Nirvana composition for the night, All Apologies. Kurt sings it fragile yet steady. Of all the songs on the set, this one is regarded as the worst performance. Kurt felt that too. He later stated, "I don't think it's the best performance from the Unplugged thing. We've played that song a lot better before." Following that, we begin on the final song of the night. Another cover, this time Lead Belly's Where Did You Sleep Last Night? It is the most haunting and unforgettable. Kurt starts the song solo as with Pennyroyal Tea. He's joined by the others in the second verse. The tempo is slow and deliberate. The song slowly builds, with Kurt almost sinking into hopelessness. As the song reaches the end, Kurt goes quiet and gently sings in a deeply sad tone. He then explodes in a chilling scream for the final verses. After the show, Kurt walked off the stage convinced it had gone badly. He told the MTV executive who bought him the Valium and sat close by the whole time, "I think it was bad. I don't think it was very good." He cited the audience's silence as proof, misinterpreting their silence as disapproval rather than awe. She quickly responded, "I think you're wrong, it was stunning." Chris Novoselic also praised Kurt, stating, "You did a great job up there, man." When someone else complimented his guitar work, he snapped back that he was a shitty guitar player. He left and avoided the after-show party. Kurt was still confused by the audience's reaction, and he told the MTV executive no one liked it. "Usually people are jumping up and down at the end of our shows." She replied, "Kurt, they think you're Jesus Christ. Most people haven't had the chance to see you that close. They were totally taken with you." Kurt finally changed his mind and said, "I was really good tonight, wasn't I?" Kurt would never live to see the outcome of the show. The live album MTV Unplugged in New York was released in November 1994, 7 months after Kurt's death. Today it's considered one of the greatest live albums ever recorded. Kurt's raw vulnerability stood in stark contrast to the overblown energy of early 90s rock, proving that quiet intimacy can carry just as much weight as amplified power. Thank you to everyone who supports the channel, and if you wish to donate, it would be greatly appreciated. Just click the three symbols next to the video, then the thanks icon, and choose however much you wish to donate. Everything donated goes directly back into the channel to make better quality videos. As always, thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next video.